I am Brad Keelor. He is Arvin Farid. Next up on Director's Cut, you're going to get stories about beer, wine, and who knows what else. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week until I get fired or something else happens that I don't see in my future, I sit down with a different Geo-Institute member who has stories to tell. Some of them are personal, some of them are professional, some of them are about alcohol. We're going to find out this week, but all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, after you watch this today, head over to geoinstitute.org. You can do that on your iPad, on your computer, on your phone, maybe even in your brain if you are that advanced. And you will find out there that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And if you like what you see today, and I promise you, it's going to be a good one, you should click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Joining us from Boise, Idaho today, where he is a faculty member at Boise State University, and also the chair of the upcoming GeoEnvironMeet conference that we'll be holding in September in Portland. And you might hear a little bit about that later on in the interview. It is Arvin Farid. Arvin, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me for this interview.
We are going to have a great time today. I always have a great time, and I hope that my guests have a great time. We have 10 questions, the same way that we do every week. 2 of them are the same that we ask everybody, and we have to start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Okay, my job is roughly 30 to 40% teaching, 20% service to the university, the professional community, and so on. And the rest is research, 40 to 50% research. I love my job, and I always say that one of the reasons I love my job is I get paid to learn. So what else would you want? You just get paid to learn. So that's hopefully that's within 45 seconds.
Oh, you cleared it easily. I'm also not very strict. I want to ask you a specific question about that service component. Whenever we go to somebody and we ask them to be a conference chair, or they get asked to be a conference chair, you know, a lot of the time we get, well, I have to think about this. I have to talk about it. What kind of calculation do you make when you think about how it's going to fit in with the other job responsibilities you have? Like, how did you plan for what you're doing for GeoEnvironment Conference, for example?
It's a very interesting question. The service part is the one that most universities, including ours, try to cap. Basically, you could be working 150% of your workload in service. Still only 10-20% of that counts. So we got to be careful. Now, if you're an assistant professor, we try to advise assistant professors to limit that, to focus on research and build their programs. But even with them, or if you're an associate or full prof, later on, that's the one that keeps ballooning if you don't know if you have a passion or you don't know how to say no. So when I started this career, there were things that I had passions for, and they were ballooning. And then there were things that, hey, a friend would ask, can you do this? Can you do that? And so on. And then you would say yes, and then you get stuck and overwhelmed. Funny story, once I was telling a former mentor of mine that, hey, I was overwhelmed with the service amount, and I kept saying yes. And he said, just take on what you have a passion for and you like, and the rest just say no. And I said, I don't know how to say no. And he said, just say yes to friends, no to others. Then fast forward 10, 15 years later, I saw him and I said, look, I'm overwhelmed again. And he said, just say yes to friends and no to everybody else. And I said, that's what I do. And he said, you have too many friends, just cut some out. So,
I like
that's
that.
what it is.
That's a perfect answer. And we do appreciate you taking the time to serve as chair for this conference, because we know it's a big lift. We have to ask the fun questions on Director's Cut too. We always get right to those after the job description. And so we start with this, Arvin. When are you the most competitive?
Oh, gee. Ever since I was a kid, I was very competitive in everything. Sports, schoolwork, and so on and so forth, every gathering and so on. And gradually, I tried to calm myself down and realized even in work and graduate school and postgraduate school, I was very competitive. So I thought that was too much. So I'm trying to calm myself down. And once in a while, I say, oh, gee, I got to be competitive again and push back. But that was my nature. Like
how hard was it for you as a kid? I mean, this was always one of my challenges, right? If someone did better than me at something, it was almost a little vindictive, right? Like I didn't just want to beat them the next time. I wanted to absolutely destroy them. Like, how was it for you?
I wasn't that mean. No, I was competitive. I felt the urge that I gotta do much better and beat them. But I think I took it more on myself, that I felt like, hey, I was kicking my own butt more to do better. So when I see somebody succeeds, I say, hey, I got to catch up with them or pass them. So it was more internal than external. But yes, if you could beat, I would try to beat them, but not as meanly as you.
I've moved on, by the way.
I know.
For
after
everybody
a while,
out
you
there.
realize, you realize. I mean, it's a certain dose of competitiveness is very healthy and leads to success. Beyond that, it was a little too harmful.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's somebody else
To myself,
doing these interviews like this that now I'm gonna want to beat. Like, I have to be a better interviewer. The third question is always the research question. This week is no different. You have a really interesting interdisciplinary research background where you actually have 2 bachelor's degrees, and I mean they're both engineering, but they're not that closely related. How has this influenced your civil engineering work and your outlook on the profession?
As I always mention, I may have ADD because I see something shiny and exciting and just run that way. So I started with electrical engineering, and then civil engineering came along. My master's was in civil engineering, purely civil engineering. My PhD was mostly in an electrical engineering department. I mean, it was in civil and electrical. And I got into geophysics, and I got to this realization that the challenges that we face nowadays are so grand that one discipline cannot solve them. And going to different conferences, different communities, I realized that there are solutions that they have that we have to work for 20 years to get to. Or they have problems that they have that we have solutions for. It's just the left and right hands apparently did not talk. And as much as NSF has been pushing for different disciplines to work together and the lines to fade, some of us, especially engineers, we do well in what we do and just somehow pigeonhole ourselves in there. But in my opinion, 1 or 2, even I think we're past interdisciplinary or even multidisciplinary. We got to be transdisciplinary, meaning that not only work with others from other disciplines, be multidisciplinary yourself. So I hate to say that even though I was at school, I was good at chemistry and biology, I never pursued them to the level I wanted. Now I regret. So my suggestion to graduate students is to start early. If you think there's something that you don't know, just go for that one. Just go for it. So, and that's my opinion, and I hope that others agree with me.
I like that. And having been on that other side, and your dean has been on the other side, was at NSF for several years. When you're in the funding agency mentality, you're right. You try to get the community like kicking and screaming to do this interdisciplinary work. And it's hard because you have some people who are just naturally drawn to that and who get it and say, oh, great, this is an opportunity for me. Well, one, honestly, to get more money, but two, to work with my friend over here in this other department that I've never been able to work with before. But then you have other people who, it's not even empire building, are very content with those small like individual awards. And I don't know, when you see this in the community, what's your word of advice to those people to help them move away from that and start looking at bigger picture stuff?
The speed of progress would be way faster if you work with somebody who knows what they do in the field you have no idea. And all you need to know early on is just learn the language, how to communicate with them. You don't need to know everything. So basically, the experts can get things done much faster. And as you remember, we had this discussion about different things at GI, and you mentioned the same thing, that some folks can do it much faster. And then it just opens your eyes, and you find things that would surprise you when you see through somebody else's lens. If you take their perspective, and that's an advice apparently for marriage, for science, for job, for everything. It just changes your perspective. That's my opinion.
Magic of director's cut. You never know what you're going to get here. So that's fantastic. The next one, I think, is a question that I've used before, but maybe I worded it a little bit differently. But you're the one of the lucky ones getting this one, Arvin. What word or phrase do you say too frequently?
That's something that I should ask of others. I have no idea. If I knew, I wouldn't. So I wouldn't repeat the same word or phrase. But one thing that my wife always tells me is, even when I agree with her, I say, no, I don't disagree. And she says, for God's sake, can't you say, yes, I agree? So I think no is what I start with sometimes, even when I agree. So I gotta cut that down.
But it's interesting, though, because we were talking before we started recording, and I do something similar. I think it's a Midwestern thing to say, yeah, no, or no, yeah. And it's almost like you're putting that ambiguity in there, at least in that case, so that you don't disappoint someone or make them upset. It makes it feel a little softer when you come into it. And do you feel like maybe that's why you say your phrase?
I don't know. All I gotta do, I should stop saying no, and then think about it and find a good reason for why I say that.
I like that, though. That's good. And you're absolutely right. It's very hard to be reflective and think of something that you say too much, because you're probably right. You would make the change if you realized it, right? We ask a lot of nostalgia questions on Director's Cut, and you're going to get a couple today. And the first one is, we're going to make you think way back. What was your first pet?
My first pet. Actually, there are two different answers to that. My mom used to have a cat, and the cat gave birth. It was a stray cat, and gave birth to 4 other cats. And my dad was unhappy because he thought the population would just outgrow the size of the building. So, and my mom, to find some accomplices, she said, hey, this cat is, we're 4 siblings. This is his, this is hers, this is his, and so on and so forth. So I ended up with a cat for a while. I'm not a cat person, I'm a dog person. So that was the first of sort of unwanted pet. I mean, I love that cat anyways, but that I didn't initiate it. But my own first pet was a German Shepherd named Sherry. And I love that dog. I still miss that dog. And she was getting old, and before she died, we gave her away, and then I moved. So to me, she's alive, still alive,
Oh, I
30
like
years,
that.
40 years later.
We have to go back to the cats here because I'm interested in your dad's perspective on how your mom solved this situation because all the cats were still in the house, right?
I
It's
know.
not like it really changed anything. So did that convince him, or was he still annoyed that there were all those cats?
He was annoyed, but outvoted. So, hey, 5 votes as opposed to 1
The super important
against
family
his.
dynamics, right? Where everybody is. It's such a democratic family. I
Yeah.
like that. The second question that we ask everybody when they come on Director's Cut is, how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
Oh, I was a graduate student, God, back, I think it was 2003 or 2 or whatever, 4. And my advisor said, hey, are you an ASCE member? And I said, yes. And he said, are you a GI member? And I said, no. Should I? And he said, yes, you should. So I joined GI, and when I renewed my ASCE membership, and then I went to my first Geo-Congress, because I had gone to a couple of other geophysics conferences and symposia. And as a matter of fact, I went to another civil engineering conference where I met Peck, Ralph Peck. And this was my first Geo-Congress in, I believe it was 2005. I think it was in Austin, if I'm not mistaken. And then I attended 2 committee meetings. One was geoenvironmental engineering, the other one was computational geotechniques. And I thought, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be involved in. And ever since, I stayed involved in GI and enjoy it. This is a community that small enough that we know most of our friends, but large enough that you find new friends every time that you go to GI meetings or geo-congresses or other conferences by GI.
So what was your experience meeting Ralph Peck like? I mean, were you freaked out or were you very comfortable going up and talking to him and everything? How was that?
Oh, he was amazing. He made us feel comfortable. It was a group of like 4 of us. And we talked to him. Basically, we took him out of the room when there was a keynote talk or something and sat outside talking to him for hours. And funny enough or sad enough, nowadays with digital cameras, you say, I take so many pictures I can't find. Back then, the camera we had was, this is 2003, I believe. It was not a digital camera. So we took pictures and then printed them, and I lost them when I moved to Boise. So I had several pictures with him and a few friends and individually with him, and lost them all. I can't find them for the life of me. I searched, I tore my office, my home, I can't find those pictures.
And it's hard, right? You're right. It's a very different search when you're looking for a physical object versus looking for a file somewhere. I think we've gotten to the point where it's probably just as frustrating because the volume of files that we have to go through is unreal. But there is something about having those paper photos too that was just super cool. So you got the memories.
Oh yeah,
I do wish you had
at least in my head
that would be good. Yeah.
of that photo.
We've mentioned Boise a couple times. I had never been to Boise until 2019. We had a board meeting out there and we did a chapter event and saw all you guys. It was really great. I had a great time. Cool place, smallish city, but you still have tall buildings and stuff, and there's still a lot of people. What are the top 3 things that people need to know about Boise?
Okay, the first thing is the climate. I love the climate. I used to say that outside California, Boise beat the climate in the entire lower 48. I still say the same with a little bit of adjustment. Outside a 30-mile band underwater in California, Boise climate beats every state among the lower 48. So the climate is the best to me. It's the other thing is that there's a famous guy who said Boise is large enough not to be boring and small enough not to be hassleful. I'm kidding. That famous guy was me. He wasn't a famous guy. That's my phrase. Honestly, I believe it's large. You said it too. It's large enough and small enough. Now it's growing. So some of the folks or local folks who lived here for 50, 60 years complain that, hey, there's traffic, there's this, there's that. To me, no, there's no traffic. So that was the first small town that I lived in. And when I moved here, I thought in a couple of years, this is a small city, so I would leave. But nope, I've lived here for 16 years. And unless I'm forced out of the city, I will not leave. So besides the size of the city and besides the climate, I love how active it is. Like you go to some much bigger cities and Friday nights or Saturday nights, the downtown is just dead. Yeah. But 2 a.m., 3 a.m., just downtown is busy, hustle and bustle. And I lived in Boston, and even 5 miles away from downtown, I wouldn't go to downtown more than a couple of times a year. In Boise, I get to drive through downtown, and at least once or twice a week. I mean, 1 day or 2 days a week. Sometimes I go to a coffee shop downtown and work. And I think we have one of the highest per capita number of coffee shops and microbreweries. So that's something interesting. So that's 3. I'll beat your question. I'll give you a 4th reason. Climate-wise, it's 4 seasons. And spring and fall are beautiful 24/7. Even summer and winter, you have hours that are perfect. Like the hottest days of summer, the heat starts around 3 p.m. and ends at 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Then it's cool. Mornings are cool and nights are cool. Even winter time during the day when the sun is out, it's just lovely. You could walk, and the temperature is much different than DC. Like 32 degrees here is pleasant, and 100 degrees here is like 85 in DC.
Which is something I didn't realize. So when I came out there, I looked at the forecast, and the first day, the high was going to be 101, and the low was going to be 59, which is that's not something you'd see here. If it was 101 during the day, the low would be maybe 80. Yeah. And it would still be 95 degrees at like 10 p.m. It was a totally different. What a great city. I really enjoyed it. So I think you've done a good job selling it to everybody. I can't remember if you were there or not. I dragged Nick and Bhaskar to the state capitol. And,
no, I wasn't with you when you went.
We did a little tour and everything, which is a fantastic building. Boise was a great time. So I heartily endorse it. You mentioned the microbreweries.
Oh, wow.
Everybody's waiting for the beer story, Arvin. So we got to get there, right? Another nostalgia question. If you look back at yourself when you were a grad student and then look at all the research that you've done over the years, what would you as a grad student be the most surprised that you had done in your career?
The most surprised one was the microbrewery research. And word of caution, that was a failed research. It didn't succeed, but I haven't given up. And the way it started is my PhD, I was working on a sort of subsurface sensing, you call it, geophysical research. And then afterward, I was still working on this for a few years. And then I thought, okay, according to Newton, great Isaac Newton, for every action, there's a reaction. So let's dig into the reactions. The media, soil media scatters the electromagnetic waves. That's how you detect things. What are the impacts of the electromagnetic waves on the media? So, and along the way, we realized the impact on contaminants, waters, hydraulic conductivity, soil, microbial life that's responsible for biodegradation. And one day we're at the microbrewery in town talking with a a couple of colleagues and graduate students about beer, and the owner told us that, or the owner told the graduate students, and he shared it with us, that obviously among ales and lagers and sours, ales ferment in a few weeks, and then lagers maybe in a couple of months, and sours in maybe 6 months, which is why microbreweries cannot compete with big guys. So lagers and sours come from Heineken's and so on and so forth, or Busch and so on. And I told the graduate students, let's set up an experiment. We set up a freezer and put the yeast in there and tried to electromagnetically stimulate the yeast. Now, we were successful stimulating microbes and keeping the temperature, stimulating them so they grew faster, but we kept the temperature within a couple of degrees Celsius change. Unfortunately, yeast, even a degree Celsius was too much, so they all died. We tried, and they all died. So we gave up, but I'll go back to that. We got to figure a way out to stimulate them so we can ferment beer, lagers, and sours much faster. But so far, unsuccessful. But
I feel like
in my wildest dreams, I never thought I would research on beer.
But if you do any kind of research with earth science, right, whether it's geology or I feel like all the way over to geotech, it's a natural marriage with beer. I don't know what it is about these communities, right? But there's just something. When you go to AGU and the beer comes out at 11 a.m. or whatever, there's just something about it that feels right. We're going to throw the bonus question in here. I said we would talk about wine too. You're from the Shiraz region in Iran, and you even went to undergrad at what is now called the Shiraz University, right? You have to tell us about this part of the country in Iran, what's great about it, and tell us about the wine in that region.
So the climate over there and even the topography is sort of similar to Boise. It's surrounded with mountains, and it's dry, relatively dry. So it's almost a mile high. So even latitude-wise is lower than Boise, but altitude-wise is higher. And there's a lot of good variety of grape growing there. And wine, for the longest time, I thought, and everybody thought, that wine was first made in Shiraz some like 3,000, 4,000 years ago. I read somewhere that Armenians claim they made wine 6,000 years ago. Now, the guy who discovered
What's 2,000 years, right?
Discovered alcohol is also from Iran. So that's the greatest contribution to human life, I believe. So, but I think the seed was taken to different places, Australia and California and South Africa and all those places. And nowadays you find Shiraz wine everywhere, which probably comes from the seed, maybe from the recipe or the method they used, but maybe from the seeds. So if you drink Shiraz wine, that's where the name comes from.
Oh, that is fantastic. Thanks for that little tour there. I like that. We have 2 questions left. We have to talk about GeoEnvironMeet, but we're saving that for last, right? First up, what's the most controversial geotechnical opinion that you have?
Oh, you put me in a hot seat. So what am I?
Well, I want to make sure you get some emails after this.
I know. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. Ever since I learned about this in school, and even later on doing research and reading articles, this whole idea of total shear strength properties like C and Phi and total stress used for design, to me, sound a little problematic. I'm not saying it's wrong for short-term design. It's okay to use them, and people used to use them. But the community, I think nowadays, think they are thinking the same way I thought when I was a student. And I said, gee, that doesn't make any sense. And C prime and phi prime, the effective parameters, they should be more reliable, and they make more sense. So that's something that I was sort of puzzled always. And as a matter of fact, I read a couple of articles, and one of them sent around by I think back then ASCE president, I think it was Jean-Louis Briot, sent it around that was the whole discussion about this C-phi issue, the total stress design aspect. So I think that's one of the most controversial ones. The other one is not controversial. It's just the whole Moore circle idea. Having had the electrical engineering background, I think there are better ways even. I mean, Moore circle is amazing, yeah? Using Moore circles, we use the geotechnical engineers use the concept of pole, and I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but structural engineers use the concept of double angle, and to me, that's so cumbersome. And the pole method is amazing if you're dealing with any complicated condition. So structural engineers don't like it. Geotechs, we like it. But I still think there might be a way to use complex variables to better resolve this whole Moore circle and shear and normal stress at on planes at different orientations, without getting into the nitty-gritty.
I want to ask you a follow-up question about presenting controversial stuff, okay? Because it's, I think it's probably different for you. You're a full professor, you're several decades into your career at this point, you've been around. You can probably get up and say stuff like that. What do you think if somebody is coming out of grad school or still in grad school and they have opinions like this that kind of fly in the face of pretty established research work? What's the best way for them to get it out there?
Oh, just be persistent if you think it's correct, to the point that somebody proves you wrong or you prove them wrong. There was, as a matter of fact, I remember, even my soil mechanics book has something that to date I see in some soil mechanic books is that's basically not accurate or complete. And that goes back to Darcy's velocity, seepage velocity, and actual velocity, and so on and so forth. And in geoenvironmental engineering, we talk about it and we look at all aspects. In geotechnical, people don't talk about it. And then sometimes, for example, they call seepage velocity the actual velocity, which is not wrong, correct. Or sometimes even the whole calculation, sometimes they go wrong with it. And parts of that in different fields, tortuosity comes with different definitions and so on, that confuses people. Or even the whole full tensor idea of hydraulic conductivity and diffusion coefficient and so on and so forth. Those are things that have been, when people started discussing them, everybody looked at them the wrong way. What the heck is this guy talking about? But when you persist and push and brainstorm and discuss, either they prove you wrong or you prove them wrong. So I think, I think even Einstein, I'm not comparing myself or anybody in the geotechnical field with Einstein, but he said stuff that everybody laughed at, yeah? So
that's perfect then. I like that. It's time to talk about GeoEnvironMeet. It's coming up in September. We opened registration for it last week. We mentioned up at the top of the show that you are the chair. Why should people come to Portland in September for the GeoEnvironMeet conference?
One of the reasons is because of the nature of this conference. It's geoenvironmental engineering conference, the specialty conference. In my opinion, geoenvironmental engineering, even though it's called a subset of geotechnical, it's probably broader than geotechnical. And nowadays, with the grand challenges that we face, like climate change, hurricanes, wildfires out west, or this whole PFAS contamination issue that EPA nowadays made the announcement about. I mean, it was always considered an emerging contaminant, but with these grand challenges that require the entire human race to address, we, within the geoenvironmental community, shaped and formed the conference around those. So the theme of this conference is a resilient and sustainable geoenvironment in the face of the changing climate. And it's broad and it's deep. So, and you get to meet people that are pretty much all multidisciplinary. And as a matter of fact, on day one of the conference, we have 2 panels about the 2 most pressing issues for the near future. One is the wildfires that used to be only in California. Now you see them in, I think last year or 2 years ago, you saw them in New Jersey, yeah? Or even you see a new regime in Canada. I mean, Canada used to have none. Now, before it's warm enough, so dormant grass is alive and green, all of a sudden it's so hot that it catches on fire. And the smoke goes all the way to Chicago and New York or even London. So we have a panel on wildfires on Sunday. We have another panel on PFAS, which is orders of magnitude more toxic than anything else you can imagine. Like 4 to 10 parts per trillion is what EPA recently announced. And basically 98% of the water bodies in this country and around the world, and my body and your body has PFAS in it. So these are pressing issues, and we gotta get together with people outside our discipline of geotechnical engineering and find solutions for it. And with these grand challenges, we're trying to sort of think outside the box and initiate conversations that people get into these pressing issues that require the geotechnical and geoenvironmental community to play their role. We do have tools and solutions. It's just we're not using them to the extent that the community needs them. So I think this is the technical side of why they should come to the conference. We'll have great keynote talks, rising stars, state-of-the-art, state of practice, the panels. But then we have the fun events as well. We will have this experiment that will mix the cleanest thing and the dirtiest thing. We'll have a dinner cruise that goes to a Superfund site. So we'll see how that goes. We will have a combination of funding agencies, academicians, industry leaders, operators, managers of contaminated sites or wildfire burnt sites, and try to put our brains together and find a way of future for our profession.
Fantastic. For more information or to get yourself registered, just click on the link that we're going to put in the show notes below where you're watching this now. Arvin did a great job selling it, and we hope we see you there.
By the way, one last word if I have time.
Sure.
The conference used to have different names depending on where it happens. Credit to Kevin Foy, the Secretary of Geo-Environmental Engineering Technical Committee. We put our brains together, tried to come up with a new name. And as of this year, this conference is called GeoEnvironMeet, which will be repeated from now on. So to make it more memorable of a name. I know it's a little mouthful, but hopefully
but it makes
catches
sense
on.
And it's logical, and that wins the day. So Arvin, you made it through all the questions, including our little bonus question there about Shiraz. It was well done. We took a tour today, and that was excellent. I hope everybody out there loved it. And if you did like it, viewers, and I always say you probably did because you're here at the end, click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we will, of course, let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Arvin, thanks for doing this. I hope it was a good time.
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. Thank you.
That's the only right response you can give, right? That you had a good time. For our viewers, again, it's almost summertime. We have only a few more episodes of Director's Cut left before our summer break, so you want to make sure you stay tuned and enjoy those. And we will see everybody out there with a brand new episode of Director's Cut next week.
And by the way, don't forget that the registration site for GeoEnvironMeet is open. It opened last week. So hope to see you all in Portland, September 8th to 11th. Yay!
Is why